Hello creators, Bucky Dirtle here. Thank you for joining us. We are doing another video tutorial on VCV Rack. VCV Rack is a modular synthesis, open source, DAW. And this is a really exciting piece of software, I have to say. It's very exciting and it's so creative. If you're into music or sound design for TV or film, there's so many things can be done with this. It's a very exciting application. So what we're going to do today is we're going to be discussing two modules and several aspects within the modules. So we're actually going to be discussing LFO1 and LFO2. So low frequency oscillator 1 and low frequency oscillator 2. Okay, let's get started. Now you can see here I have my LFO1. I was producing a sine wave connected to my oscilloscope here, my scope, and it's showing me a nice little sine wave. Now I wanted to do that just so you can see on the scope, we can see as well as here what we're producing here. And what a low frequency oscillator, it's not really going to hear much, but we can see it for sure. Okay. So LFO, what is an LFO? LFO is a low frequency oscillator, meaning it's low, the sound is down below what we can humanly hear. It's meant to produce sounds that are so low that they're not going to be part of our music. It's meant to be used as a device to control other devices. So a low frequency oscillator can produce pulses, and the pulses are used to trigger other things. So a sine wave here, for example, you've seen a very slow sine wave on our screen. The oscillations in sine wave can be used to oscillate something else. So the voltage that's produced by this during this oscillations can be used to control many other things. So let's just have a look at this. I'm going to show you how this works first of all, and then I'm going to show you what it does, and then I'm going to show you how it does it. So I'm going to start up a VCO1 here, and I'm going to take my signal from my sine wave signal, and I'm going to put it into frequency modulation. And I'm going to take my sine wave from here, and I'm going to put it into my out. Okay, here we go. Now I got a sound. You can hear the tone. It's not really doing anything though. So, but if I turn up my frequency modulation, now you'll hear that frequency go up and down and up and down. Well, see, that's being controlled by the LFO. Let me just take this so we can have a look at what we're seeing. Change my time here. You can see that the frequency is changing, and it's being changed because that's the cycles of the LFO. So we're not hearing the LFO, we're hearing the VCO1. And the VCO1 is producing that pitch, the tone. It's being controlled by the LFO. Now, in another tutorial, I talked about the VCO1, VCO2, and the waveforms that they can produce. We're on a sine wave right now. It can do triangle, saw, and square. Well, look at this. We can also do sine wave, triangle, saw, and square on LFO. So right now, we know that a sine wave is a nice, gentle up and down cycle. We know that a triangle wave is different. A square wave is different. If we go to let's listen again and see what the difference in sound is when I switch to a different waveform in the LFO. The cycles are going up and down, nice and gentle. Let's go to saw. Now you know this is going up the tooth of the saw, and when it reaches the peak, it drops down and starts from zero again. And that's what a saw wave sounds like. That's what it sounds like. And if I go over and I put this into here, let's see if I can get this down. You can see the saw wave behind. Let's get this guy out of there. See, that's my saw wave, and that saw wave was just controlling the VCO1. So if I was to, let me take this and take that saw wave again, put it into FM. Now you can see it better. That's an excellent visual of what's actually happening. Let's do it with a triangle. You can see what it's doing to the sound. So the low frequency oscillator, the LFO, is controlling the pitch changes in the VCO. Let's try a square wave. And a square wave, you know, is squared, so it's just on, off, on, off. There you go. So there you go. It's pretty cool. It can control all kinds of cool things. Now, we can use the LFO for many, many things. Step sequencers and queuing up things and controlling this and controlling pitch and controlling volume and controlling ADSR. It's literally endless what we can do with an LFO in this situation, because for every variable, the LFO offers many, many ways to manipulate that variable. Okay, let's have a look at a few other things that are on here on our interface. We have, let's start over here, pulse width modulation. Now, this is a square wave. We can, just like with the VCO1, we can alter the pulse width. And look at this, see up on the screen? Our square wave is not symmetrical anymore. It's now, pulse width has changed. So we can change that here. Now, oh, sorry, wrong one. We can change it here, sorry, on the LFO. And we can also, by using, if we wanted to run a second LFO, we can control that pulse width with a second LFO. Now, if you want to see how that's done, that's in the video, the tutorial about the VCO. I show how we control the pulse width modulation on the VCO with an LFO. Well, we can control the LFO's pulse width modulation with another LFO. Isn't that crazy? So you can look to the other videos to see how to do that. Reset. Now, you notice that, I'm going to go back to a sine wave for a second here, like that. There you go. Now, in a sine wave, you can see that it starts its cycle in a certain place on the graph. Okay, it starts in a certain place. If you want to reset that, you can reset it. And you can reset it with a gate, with various other tools. You can reset that, and it will start the cycle. It will start again right from 0. So if it's in the middle of a cycle or 3 parts way through a cycle, when you reset is hit with from another device, it will start it again from 0. So that's what that does. Now we have here FM1, FM2. We have 2 dials to control the frequency modulation. Now, frequency modulation, let me show you this. Oh yeah, I already got it on here. Right here, we're controlling frequency modulation with the LFO. So our VCO's frequency is being changed by being controlled by the LFO. So our sine wave from the LFO is changing the pitch. And again, here's what it sounds like. That's the up and down oscillations. And again, if we go to a saw wave, we're seeing it very dramatically. Okay? Now, that ability to change the frequency of this oscillator, VCO1, we have that same ability to change the frequency of LFOs as well. So we can have another LFO or another device control the frequency of this LFO by going through the same process in FM frequency modulation. But we can do it twice. So you can have 2 devices controlling the frequency modulation. And what happens is they basically fight over it. So if you had 2 separate LFOs controlling the frequency of this device, then it would be chaos. Well, not chaos, but it would be really cool. Because if one is at 50 hertz and another one's at 20 hertz, then they're going to be going back and forth between each other. And what will happen is this waveform you see here, this nice neat saw waveform, will be all over the place. It'll be up and down and crisscross and everything, because it will all be interacting with one another. So that's why we have 2. The idea is it helps us create randoms, helps us create things that are not so even and neat, because sometimes in this music making and sound design, we don't want neat and tidy. We want lots of variations. So that's why we do that. Now, I'm going to show you another one. This is all LFO1. We have an LFO2 as well. Here's LFO2. Now, if you watch the tutorial on VCO1, you'll notice there's a VCO2. And it's very similar to VCO1, but it has a couple of features that VCO1 doesn't have. Well, LFO1, LFO2 are the same. we have frequency, the same as LFO1. And we have, oh, I never talked about this, uni and bi. Okay, we got to go through that really quickly here. Let me get rid of that. And I'll get rid of that for now. So here, our sawtooth wave is here. If I go uni, it puts it, you see the center line here, the center line down through here, this is going up and down positively. Center line alters the wave. Now, I'm gonna leave it at that. I don't want to get too technical with any of these tutorials because I don't want to turn anybody off. But this alters where the waveform is on our line, on our graph here. Auditorially, it alters it too, but it has to do with mathematics. And I'm not going to get into that in this, but it does slightly alter the wave, and you can see it on the oscilloscope. I'm not going to get into it too much here because I really don't want to turn people off with too much math. I do find that with these modular synthesis tutorials, a lot of people get turned off because it gets too complicated, and I'm trying not to. Okay, so another one here, this it flip-flops it. It inverts it. It inverts the wave. So you can see normally, like this way, on 0, it would be this way. If I flip it, bango, it inverts the wave. Pretty cool. Very useful. Very useful. You'll use this a lot. Okay, now if we go back over here to LFO2, sorry for the deviation. We have the same thing, uni and bi, and we have our invert. Now we have reset the same. We have our out the same. The out is different. I'm sorry, out is different. This one has 4 waveforms. This just has an out. But we have wave, and we have wave up here. What is that? Now, let me just take this guy over here to our out. Now, let me take our wave all the way down here. Okay, so now this is a sine wave. You can see we have a sine wave. Nice. If I move this up, you'll see that it's starting to turn into a triangle. And it is. Now it's a triangle wave. If I go further with it, it's starting to turn into a saw. And it'll turn into a saw wave. Look at that, into a saw wave. And if I keep going, it will turn into a square wave. So depending on where we are in this dial, we're going to get a different type of waveform. This can also be controlled through this control here. So control voltage can control how this responds. Okay, like the waveforms change. And actually, if we're looking for randomizations, look up on the board, look up on the oscillator. I'm just rotating this back and forth. You can see what it's doing to the wave. It's making it all crazy. So that could have very interesting results when it's controlling something like low frequency, like when it's controlling an oscillator. And let's just try that for a laugh here. We'll take our out into our frequency modulation, and let's take a sine wave, I guess, and go into here. Now if we go, you can see it makes everything kind of crazy. So there you go. There's a lot of things we can do here, and we're just scratching the surface of how to create the sounds. We're just learning the basic functionality of these tools. So that's it. LFO1, LFO2, very closely related. A lot of very similar things that it does, but they offer us a little bit difference, a little bit of a options. This is always good. Options are always good. So I hope you enjoyed that. If you have any questions or comments or some information to add to this, please let me know. You can put it in the comment section of this post. You can also contact me directly on utopian.io Discord, or on the PAL Discord, or in Steemit chats. I'm available everywhere all the time. Feel free to send me a question if you have it, and I'll see if I can get an answer. Thank you very much for watching. Good luck with your music. Be sure to check out other tutorials in here, and I hope to see you next time.